Welcome to the Pretty Powerful Podcast, where powerful women are interviewed every week to share real inspiring stories and incredible insight to help women or anyone break the barriers, be a part of innovation, shatter the glass ceiling, and dominate to the top of their sport, industry, or life's mission. Join us as we celebrate exceptional women and step into our power. And now, here's your host, Angela Gennari.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Pretty Powerful Podcast. My name is Angela Gennari, and today I am here with Georgia Leininger. Hi, Georgia.
Good morning. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you. So, Georgia Leininger can be found with her family on their little ranch surrounded by animals galore. An educator for over 18 years, she is the author of 3 children's books, with more on the way. Georgia launched Salus Publishing LLC in January 2020. Salus is an independent book publishing house with the mission to publish incredible books and unforgettable stories sustainably. With diverse and international authors and illustrators, Salus books are printed on 100% recycled paper. All mailers and promotional materials are on 100% recycled or tree-free papers as well. And Salus's public philosophy is to create, distribute, and promote high-quality books with carbon neutrality and innovation at the core. Georgia calls the hills of Northern California her home. I love Northern California. It's so beautiful there.
It is.
It is. So I want to just get started by asking, what made you want to get into publishing?
Writing and storytelling was always big for me. And so
Yeah.
I, studied that in college. I actually got my master's in journalism because I thought I'm going to be a freelance journalist, National Geographic, here I come.
I love it.
And yeah, and my master's thesis was actually on the history of paper and the use of paper in books and magazines and newspapers.
Huh.
And so, yes, it was fascinating to me, probably, insomnia curing for others. But anyway, but it really kind of got me into not just looking at the writing side of a book, but also the publishing side of it and the environmental impact of it. So it was years later when I wrote my first children's book, when I was pregnant with my son. And I started the process of like, oh, I've written this beautiful story. Yay, now I get it published. And it is, especially for an unknown author, it's really hard. And so when you finally find a publisher who wants to publish your book and you're so excited, and then I get to say, okay, what about recycled paper? Or there's, canaf paper. What about this? What about this? And they get to say, oh, that's adorable. No. And so because they have their contract, they have their, their shtick down. And so they're like, no, we use this paper, we do this, and we're all set. Thanks. And so, and then it was with my second book that I thought, okay, I really want to, try to do this more kind of sustainably or environmentally friendly. So Amazon has print on demand, Amazon KDP. And so one of the biggest problems with, I think, book publishing, especially, well, even magazine and newspapers too, is the amount of waste that comes on the back end. When the books aren't bought, when the newspapers and the magazines aren't bought, well, they just get tossed. And, and so I thought, okay, well, with print on demand, you're only printing the stuff that is literally being bought in demand, less waste.
Right.
So then, and yet again, I was trying to even kind of contacting Amazon, like, hey, recycled paper, even like a percentage of it, something. And Amazon's like, oh, no.
Yeah.
So with the third book, I had met a lot of like other authors. I've been going to conferences like the Pacific Northwest Writers Association. I'd been at one of the judges on, for their panels and all this stuff. And I just thought, if I want to do this the way that I want to do this, then I got to do this myself.
Yeah.
And so, I had the extremely convenient timing of launching a company in January of 2020.
Awesome.
And yes, and it was children's books. And it was children's authors who were so excited about going into schools and doing events.
Oh,
and so then, of course, we had the pandemic. So, but it was an opportunity to kind of figure out, like online and YouTube videos and Zoom calls and author meets, with classrooms through Zoom. And we just got really kind of innovative and we went through there. So I guess it was basically, I started this company as kind of, I saw a need and I
Mhm.
couldn't find anyone else who was fulfilling that need. So it was like, okay, well, here we go.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Very
Yeah,
cool. Well, I love that you've combined your passion for sustainability with your passion for writing, and you've made a career out of that, and you've created a company and you saw a need. So I think
yeah,
that's where great entrepreneurs are born is, you don't have to have a business background. You have to have a passion and a cause
right,
and, something that you're willing to, risk, putting yourself out there for. So, well, good for you
absolutely.
for taking that on. So why are trees such a bad, that's just what we know of with paper. So why, um, because I've heard, and I could be totally wrong on this. And again, I'm not getting, um, I didn't do a thesis on it. So you will be the expert. But why not trees? And are recycled papers really better? Because doesn't it take more energy and so forth to make that recycled paper? Or, tell me what that means or what that looks like.
All right, phenomenal question. So, long story short,
Hmm.
paper, of course, for thousands of years has been made in a lot of different ways. Like the
Uh-huh.
ancient Egyptians, they used jute, right, and kind of like the grasses that grew along the Nile. In China, yet again, it was those long grasses. And so you have in the hemp family, there are like 12 different plants.
Mm.
And what's incredible about hemp is the fibers that are in them. The fibers are very pliable, very movable. You don't need a lot of chemicals or a lot of treatment to get those fibers to get into the shape and the texture and the fold of what you want.
Hmm.
And so with something like that, it's very easy. And so especially, I mean, even looking at scrolls in and of themselves, and you can roll up paper, that actually helps to protect it quite a bit. Less, surface, exposure, more protection from like elements like water, stuff like that. So those for a long time were extremely efficient ways of making paper, like I say, because they didn't really have a lot of chlorine or acids back then.
Yeah.
So then, of course, you look at the oldest books, well, those were vellum. So those were leather, like animal skin.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so extremely durable. That's why we still have those books,
Right.
because that stuff, yet again, protected, can last for a very long time. But of course, we can't use leather on, on all of our books. So when you have the printing press and you have mass production of books, like, yay, now you
Mm.
need much more material. So for a while, they were even like using recycled clothing
Oh,
because it was
wow.
cotton and stuff like that. Yet again, like fibers that have already been treated. So it's a lot easier and faster and more efficient to get them to kind of reshape in the way that you want them to. So then
Mm.
discovery of the new world, and hey, there are all these, billions and billions of trees, these huge trees. Well, gosh, they're in the way. What are we going to do with them? So it became the rise of the tree paper. Trees, of course, extremely strong. And so their fibers are extremely rigid. And
Uh-huh.
so to get them to become pliable, now you've got chlorine, and now you've got
Mm.
acids, and now you have all these things that you need to treat this with to really get it to the consistency and the thickness or thinness or whatever that you want, or the color, like the bleached white, that takes a
Mhm.
lot. And so there's a huge process. And even in the process of making paper and getting it to that color and that consistency, now you have all of that runoff that typically just goes into the rivers.
Mhm.
So that's for the kind of the fresh paper, right? And so now as far as recycled paper. So yes, there of course, as with anything, there's impact in recollecting that paper and getting it back. And then of course, all that paper has a color to it. It's already been dyed, it's already done that. So there is the process of trying to kind of recolor that.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's like if you go into, your stores, the recycled paper towels, well, those are kind of the like the brown because they
Yeah.
don't need to be white. And it's so much more efficient to kind of keep them, you mix all colors together and you're going to get a brown. And so
Mhm.
it's easier to kind of keep that brown, like recycled toilet paper. Typically it's kind of off white or tan. Fantastic. It was already there.
Mhm.
So yeah, so with recycled paper, the it is far easier and fewer chemicals to kind of get it back into the shape and the pliability that you want. But yes, to get it to that bright white, there are more chemicals, but far less than in the original process.
Okay.
So, long answer to your short question.
So why don't we go back to using hemp, and why is hemp so expensive? Because I've seen books made
Oh,
of
yeah.
hemp, and but why is it so expensive if it's so easy to grow and use?
Phenomenal question, because yet again, we have corporations who already have their systems in place. And
Mm,
why should they change if they don't have to?
right.
When we look at everything, it's like car companies. Car companies have been forced to try to make their cars more efficient,
Hmm.
gas companies and electric and all that stuff. When you have, a system that is in place, to try to move and change that system is hard. So, I
Mm.
mean, like, years ago, so this was, 20 years ago when I was doing my thesis, like companies like Georgia Pacific and all of these, they already had like hemp seeds and knaf seeds.
Yeah.
Knaf is one form of jute that's phenomenal. Knaf, it grows super tall like a tree. It's a phenomenal, phenomenal plant. But of course, these companies, they already have their contracts with Madagascar and their forests and the Philippines and
Mm.
Brazil and all these other, countries. So it's like, oh gosh, well, if we have to, plant new forests, if we have to do all this, we've already got this, why should we change if we don't have to?
Right, right.
So I think like with so many things in economics, you create the demand and the supply will come.
Yeah.
And so I think once more and more people know about, like, hey, this is an option, hey, these are something that we can do, then suddenly you're going to see, oh, look, it's bamboo paper.
Yeah, yeah.
And bamboo's another great one.
I was
And
about to
so
say
it's,
bamboo I've heard a lot about because
oh, yeah,
bamboo, it grows like crazy and it gets,
exactly.
yeah, and there's it's plentiful. It just takes a long
Yes,
time for it to first take root. But once it
exactly.
does, it's abundant.
Yeah, it's practically a weed. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so absolutely. So I think it's growing. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's starting, but I think it's literally just it's honestly it's the consumers going into the bookstores and saying, "Hey, do you have anything printed on this?" And
Yes.
then it's the bookstores going to the distributors and to the publishers and saying, "Hey, my customers have been asking about this." And
Mm-hmm.
it is that, literally grassroots, pun intended, process. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think we're getting there. It's just a lot slower than it needs to be. So,
Interesting. Okay. Well, I
yeah,
love that. Yeah. So thank you so much for that very good description because I've wondered about that. I'm like, if it is so plentiful and so
right,
inexpensive and it's less, you know, uh harmful to the environment, why aren't
right.
we doing it? And it's just one of those
Yeah,
things where, I was curious about the trees. Like I just thought it was just more efficient to do trees. And so that's why I thought that. But I'm glad to hear that, if we just make the push, just like with anything, our
exactly.
dollars talk. So,
Yep. Dollars talk. Absolutely.
mhm.
100%.
Very cool, very interesting. So
Yeah.
then you went into after you after you graduated and did your thesis, did you specifically want to write children's books or was it just, kind of how did that come about?
Um, so I didn't envision myself as a children's book author. I thought I was just kind of an author. Like I've written short
Yeah.
stories,
Mm-hmm.
gotten published and, kind of, and of course, like a lot of authors, I've started novels,
Okay.
started them. They're still in process, it's like I've got them all kind of plotted out. And one of these days, I'll get to finishing it. But then
Yeah.
of course, as life happens, I look at the novels that I started in my 20s and now in my 40s. It's going to be a very different book when I do finish it, right? Our perspective changes.
Yeah.
Um, so no, so yeah, I honestly thought of myself as more of kind of like, historical fiction or stuff like that. But really it was when I was pregnant with my son.
Uh-huh.
It was this kind of it was this idea of like, what about like what if there was a world where anything was possible? And what
Mm.
if? And it was kind of the what if questions, right? And so this kind of story popped in my head, and I am proficient in Spanish, and so I wrote it in English and Spanish.
Oh,
And
very
so
cool.
and yeah, and so it was just, yeah, it kind of came about that way. And then for my second book, very very similar. It was an early like chapter book, and it was about two dogs that I owned. They were two rescues, and well, actually three dogs. Two were there, my little escape artists, and it
Uh-huh.
was just kind of real life stuff. And they went on so many antics, and they drove me crazy. And so it was the idea of I have to write this down because no one would believe me if I said this. You know, like
I love it.
two of my dogs escaped. They went to the local elementary school during snack time so they could, kind of beg for, peanut butter and
Oh,
jelly sandwiches.
that's
And
funny.
so, yeah, and it's just, So I think like the second book was literally kind of to honor them, my crazy dogs.
Yeah.
And then it's just, and especially after that book, so many people, who have read it have come up and are just like, oh, my dogs did the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
oh, aren't they crazy? And so it's just, it's a way to kind of relate to people. It's that universal, like, gosh, we love them, but they drive us nuts.
Yes,
And
yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
funny because both of my dogs now, it's like they won't even leave the front porch. But the first, my older one, when he was a puppy, he was constantly running away until he realized that there was no benefit to running away because he got
Right.
food at the house.
Yep.
He's very
Oh, yeah.
food driven. And so,
Yep.
he ran away for quite a bit and then he finally stopped. And then I adopted another one from a rescue and he was a few years old. Same thing though. He would be out in the neighborhood and I'd see a Facebook
Hmm.
post saying, "Hey, whose dog is this?" Because we had
Yep.
just adopted him, hadn't even gotten his collar. I mean, his tag yet. And whose dog is this? And I brought him into the house and I fed him and I gave him water and the kids are playing with him. And this happened like 4 or 5 times. And so
Hmm.
I finally had to say, if you see this dog, do not feed him, pet him, be nice to him in
Right.
any way. He will come home, but he's being rewarded for running away. And then
Right.
he thinks that it's fun because he gets to
Oh,
go
yeah.
out and visit with neighbors and get food and get played with. And I was
Yep.
like, just let him. And then sure enough, it stopped the running away. Like I just said,
Yep.
just he will make his way back home and he will realize the food and the attention is all here at home.
Yep.
So
Stay here. Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So
Absolutely. 100%.
gosh, dogs. Yes, I love
I
them
know.
though. They're the
Oh, yeah.
best. They're the most loyal, wonderful little beings, but yeah, they,
Hmm.
they
But
have
they
to
just
learn
drive you
just like
crazy.
children. They're just
Yep.
like children. Um,
Yep. Absolutely.
so do you find it difficult to write children's books that will resonate with children? Like, I know that you said, you wrote about your dogs because you thought this is relatable. So how hard is it to write children's books? Because that audience, how do you capture that
Oh, yeah.
audience?
Um, that's a great question. Well, one, so I'm a teacher. So I've been a teacher
Oh,
for 18 years. And
yeah.
so and I've taught, I started teaching high school. And so it's like when you get to know your students, you really kind of, you hear the
Mm,
things that they're talking about and the questions that they ask and the things that are concerning them. And then I taught community college. And of course, community college is wonderful because it's a wide range of,
mm,
student ages. And then for the last 6 years, I've been at a TK through eighth. And so, like my children have gone to that school and all this stuff. And yet again, it's like I think when you know kids and when you work with kids, there's kind of a different, you see kind of the things like their jokes, like the stuff that they think is
mm,
funny, and and just and yeah, their humor and yeah, and what they what questions they ask and what does concern them, like what and stuff. So I think that kind of gives you an insight into
yeah.
that, and but also I think a lot of it is trial and error. Like one of my
Mm.
authors who writes a phenomenal series. His name is Andy Domick, and he took regular fairy tales and he ruined them with cabbage.
Ah,
And
interesting.
so, yeah, so his first book was about gardening because he loves to garden with his kids. And so, but cabbage has always been like the bane of his existence when it comes to gardening,
Uh-huh.
and he's hated it anyway. And so he, is this idea of what about Goldilocks and the Three Bears? Well, what if you insert cabbage into the story and that just ruins it? And so he wrote it, and it was one of those. I remember like when I first read the manuscript for it, like I was laughing, and so then
Right.
I'm like, okay, I've got to, where's my test audience? So I sent it, so I gave it like to my children for them to read, and they start laughing. And so then it was just, and then even talk to some of my students about it. I'm like, what would you think about? It's kind of your own little
Yeah.
test, test audience. And so and they thought it was hilarious. And so I think it's honestly, I think there are certain things that resonate with everyone, right?
Yeah.
Like my third book is called The Trees, and it's about this little kind of tree seedling who's like, trying to find home, right? And so through a forest fire, which is common in California,
Uh-huh.
this tree, seedling is sent on the wind and is trying to find a place. And I think that kind of resonates with a lot of people as far as trying to find where they fit in the world.
Yeah.
So, I think it's kind of a combo of a lot of things.
Very cool. I love that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because I think, you definitely have an advantage being a teacher and listening in on these conversations. That's a really, really nice added benefit. So, so you got out of, so when you graduated, you went straight into teaching?
No, it was kind of a circuitous route. You know,
Uh-huh.
my grandfather, who is my namesake and my mentor, for years he'd been saying like, Georgia, you should think about teaching. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 I don't want to do that. No, no, no. I'm going to be
Uh,
the freelance journalist and I'm going to, fly around the world and I'm going to do all these cool stories. and it was one of those like I say, I went to grad school. I got my master's in journalism, and my mentor in the program, she was a freelance journalist. She had been one for 16 years. She could tell you all these stories about like all the countries she'd been to, all the things she'd done,
oh, that's
like
amazing.
she'd written for, right. And she took the job at the University of Oregon at the time, and that was the first house she had ever bought. And she adopted her first dog at that time
Oh,
because, of course, when you're traveling, there's no time for
nope.
family, there's no time for dogs, there's no time for any of that.
Right.
And I remember at the time I was kind of like, huh, hmm. And so it was after I graduated. I've been in school, for 20 years. And so I did some volunteer work. I went to the Galapagos Islands and I volunteered for an environmental organization there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting on the beach and there are these like, these little Spanish speaking kids, and they're all around me and they want to learn English and I'm practicing my Spanish.
Uh-huh.
And here I've been fighting invasive species all day. And the best part of my day was just talking with these kids,
Oh, that's
and them asking
awesome.
me questions. Yeah. And so it was one of those, I kind of came back and after doing some more volunteer work in Ireland. And then I came home and I got to eat some crow with my grandfather. And I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll become a teacher. All right. And so and I remember he was just smiling, like, yeah, I knew it.
Uh-huh.
Like, I knew.
Oh,
So
that's awesome.
yeah. It was kind of a roundabout way, but yeah, I got
Yeah.
there.
Interesting. I love that story. So,
Yeah.
sometimes people know us better than we know ourselves every once in a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
Very cool. So, how do you find inspiration for your books?
Um, I find it in kind of, I think, a lot of different ways. I think life
Mm-hmm.
experience is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And like I'd mentioned earlier, it just like there's a novel I started in my 20s, and it's just because it was like certain ideas hit you, and like, it's the whatabouts, or it's this, or it's
Yeah.
this. And then life experience, it's just it changes you, and it kind of,
Mm.
you evolve in so many ways because of what life presents to you. And
Yeah.
so now it's like I would write a very kind of different book just because of the experiences I've had. So I think
Right.
sometimes it's experience,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think it's kind of what you read in the world and what you learn about and what you explore and things like that. So I think it comes from a lot of, your curiosity, your involvement in our worlds, everything that's going on, and it's how it impacts you and how do you feel about it. I think inspiration can come from so many different facets.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that you live on a ranch too, because you've
Yeah.
got what goats, chickens, dogs. I mean, that's so
Yeah.
cool. So I'm sure you
Hmm.
get some inspiration there too.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
Oh,
like our
that's
goats
awesome.
are, yeah, phenomenal. So yeah.
Yeah. My sister used to have goats and she could just tell me some hysterical stories about
Oh
them.
yeah.
They are
Yep.
very, very interesting animals.
They
So,
they're incredible. And it's funny because it was kind of a roundabout way that how we got them.
uh-huh.
Because of course, we live in kind of rural California up in the foothills. So of course, wildfire, big issue for us.
Mm,
And so in this land used to be a fruit orchard, it used to be gold mining way back when. And so blackberries, so blackberry like bushes are an
uh-huh.
incredibly invasive species around here. And
Really?
so if you oh yeah,
Huh.
like so blackberries, like the bushes can get over 10 feet high. They can
Wow.
just Oh, and they just strangle out everything underneath them. They're horrible to like native
Mm,
plants and trees. They're awful. Well, we were kind of overrun by them. And so we had hired brush removal companies to come in and like clear it out. And that's great. And then 6 months later, the blackberries are like, yay, we're back. And so my husband and I were kind of thinking, like, what can we do? Like, this is ridiculous. And we tried to kind of call like various, like the traveling goat herds, you know, you kind of
Yeah.
see them on the sides of highways and all that. And so we'd said, okay, well, we've got a little ranch. Like, would you want to come out and, you know, you guys can eat our stuff? And they said, oh, that's too small for us. Like, no. Like we go for the big pastures. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Hmm.
So we got our first 3 goats because we thought, all right, guys, how about it?
Yeah.
And then we just kind of grew our herd from there. And now they've done a phenomenal job. And it's wonderful to see kind of the plants that are coming back, and
Yeah.
berry vines are gone, and they're fantastic. They're so fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
Ridiculous. It's so fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. There was my brother-in-law had one of the goats. They used to joke had a crush on him because he would come in and he would immediately follow him he just couldn't be
Oh yeah.
without him, and
Yeah.
would whine when he left, and it was just it
Yeah.
was pretty funny.
Yeah.
So,
We have a bottle baby. Her name is Pumpkin because she's the color
oh,
of a pumpkin. And
oh,
so, yeah, and especially like with bottle babies, whenever they've been, for various reasons, rejected by mom, so then
mm,
they're completely dependent on you for survival. And so, yes, for our sweet little Pumpkin, you know, she got used to being brought into the house, and you
yeah,
know, it's the bottle feeding, and then she gets to nap on your chest or nap in your
uh-huh,
lap. And so now she's almost to the stage where she doesn't need milk anymore, but there's no telling her that. And then
yeah,
as soon as you leave the pasture, she's like, okay, yep, let's go inside now. Yep. You know,
yep.
it's time for my nap on the lap. And you're like, no, you get to be out with the goats. Like you get to be, it's like, no, I'm not one of them. Come on,
Yeah. Come on, I'm a
let's go.
baby human.
Exactly. Like it is my
Oh.
nap time. Let's go. So yeah, they're wonderful. They're great.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, as an author, and a teacher and a mom, how do you balance it all?
That is a phenomenal, fantastic question. It is a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's just I've had some phenomenal advice over the years from, you know, some incredible women. And it's, you know, one, you know, her advice was phenomenal because at some point I was just berating myself like I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should have done this, I should. And
Yeah.
you know, she said, Georgia, try not to shit all over yourself.
Yeah, that's
And
such
so
great
I was like,
advice.
exactly. So I was like, oh, yes, yep, absolutely. And so,
Yeah.
you know, another advice, of course, is your calendar. You know, you just live on the calendar, and, you know, and just the more you can kind of try to keep everything organized and keep it ahead, you know, it's the balance. And then I think the last thing is just to give yourself some grace
Yeah.
because we're going to make the mistakes. We're going to drop the ball sometimes. And, you know, it's just, you
Yeah.
know, our kids are fed, my family is safe, you know, the home, you know, the home's still standing, you know,
Yeah.
the bills are paid, we're doing fine, we're doing
Yeah.
okay. And tomorrow's another to-do list, and it's another day, and we'll knock it down then. So it's just,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Fantastic. So, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Ooh, lighten up.
Yeah.
Lighten up on yourself. You know, just
Yeah.
I think so many kids, especially these days too, you know, you look at teenagers now, and then it's just they have so much on their shoulders,
Yeah,
right?
they
There's so
do.
much, you know, there's so much kind of awareness of everything going on. And it's just that kind of, I think it is easy for an 18-year-old to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it is easy to kind of like, you know, where do I fit in, and how am I gonna, how? And
Yeah.
and I think it's just, I think the advice would be number one, lighten up. And
Yeah.
two, you know, play to your strengths.
Mm.
And you know, like, so my grandfather, he was an economist. He absolutely loved economics, and so he thought I would too. And so he's like, oh, in school you should study economics, and oh, you're gonna love it, and then you can get your MBA, and then you can do all these great things, and oh, won't this be fantastic? And for a long time, my 18 and 19 and 20-year-old self was desperately trying to make him happy.
Yeah.
And it was at the ripe old age of 21 where you have to realize, like, you know, even my economics professors are telling me, you know, patting me on the head nicely and saying, this is not for you. Like, let it go.
Oh.
And so, and I think it's just, you know, looking back, I would tell myself, like, live your life for you. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you were given life so that you could live it. That's what I tell my children, is that I
Yeah.
gave you life so that you could live it. And you're not doing it for me. You're not, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's make make yourself happy, figure out your own path.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good. Yeah, I agree. We can be very, very tough on ourselves. And the 18-year-olds now, I don't like they have such a different worldview. Like when I was
Oh yeah.
18, my view was limited. I knew what I wanted to accomplish. I was hard on myself, but I didn't feel the
Right.
pressure from outside as much as other kids do now. The
Yeah.
outside pressure of social media pressure and,
Oh
you
my
know,
gosh.
now getting into college, you've got to like have like a 4.3 or something
Oh
absolutely
yeah.
insane. So
Yeah.
and you have to be an athlete and you have to volunteer and you have to be in the band
Right.
and you have to do like it's not fair for these kids to
Exactly.
have these ridiculous standards
Yep.
that they have to meet because I mean I know so many people have their children on antidepressants right now because the pressure is just
Yes.
intense
Oh
and
yeah.
it's not fair. Yeah. I
Exactly.
tell my son, I'm like, listen, maintain a 3.5 and enjoy life and work
Yep.
hard and
Yep.
just enjoy life because you're only going to be 18 one time. You're only going to be
Yep.
17 one time. And you have your whole life to have to deal with the pressure of the outside world. I
Yeah.
don't care about that right now. Like that is not my concern. Like, do I want you to go to college? Sure. Do you have to go to an Ivy League? Absolutely not. Like, do
No.
do I even want you to? No, because I want you to
Right.
have a little bit of balance and fun in your life. And so, I want him to enjoy being a kid and not have all the pressures of, having to have, because I can tell you, I killed myself in college almost getting on the
Yep.
dean's list and making sure that I did not enjoy college. I was so
Right.
focused on my grades that for the first 2 years I did. For the second 2 years, it was all about schoolwork, schoolwork, schoolwork. And since then, not one person has asked me what my grade point average was in college. Not one.
Exactly. Oh
And
yeah.
so
No.
they don't care
Exactly.
that I graduated on the dean's list. Nobody cares.
Right.
So,
Right. Exactly.
I was,
It's
I
not like you're
was
going to bring that up in conversation. So
never.
like, Dean's list, it's like,
Yeah, you're not in an
right.
interview. Nobody's asking for your transcript. It doesn't
Right.
freaking matter. Yeah.
Oh
So, I
yeah.
mean, the pressure we put on ourselves is ridiculous. And so,
Oh yeah.
just do the best you can, work with the options you have, try your
Yep.
hardest and yeah, just be happy. Just yeah, the
Well,
intense pressure.
absolutely. And especially like to that end, I remember, freshman year of college and,
Yeah.
and like I got into like UCLA and there are so many kids and this was the first time they're away from home. This is the first time they're not constantly under the parent, control
Yeah.
and you need to do your homework. And my freshman year, there were lots of kids who like they either flunked out, dropped out because
Mm-hmm.
it was too much pressure.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and like years later teaching at a community college, it was such an incredible insight because you have a lot of, kids or even people in their early 20s, people are in late 20s, 30s, and it's just they come back to education because they know what they want to do. That kind of like
Mm-hmm.
they know themselves more, they know what they want. And it's just like some of my all-time favorite students were community college students
Yep.
because they knew themselves, they had their goal, they'd figured it out, and they were driven and but they had their life balance too because you're right,
Yeah.
it's like they had enjoyed life, they had gone on their travels, they'd done their stuff,
Yeah.
and it was just such a different mindset, a different kind of vibe and feel. And honestly, like I look at my own kids and it's just, and you're right, it's just the idea of kind of the Ivy League. Oh, heck
Oh,
no.
I don't want
You
that
know,
for him at all. Because I
no,
don't feel like you get the best life education out of a book. I think you get it out of
no.
experiences. And so I would much rather him say, you know what, I'm going to ditch the Ivy League idea and I'm just going to go travel the world and spend some
Mm-hmm.
time meeting people from
Yeah.
other cultures and having great
Yeah.
experiences. Like he already started his first book company. He already has learned a ton with that. And so it's like,
Yeah.
those are the things I would rather him do. I'd rather him focus on running a business right now and learning
Right.
those lessons versus, sitting down and making sure he masters calculus.
Oh,
Like,
right.
I don't
Well,
care.
exactly, because there's so much of it is like you have to learn about yourself at that age. You have to
Yes.
learn about, it's kind of like really test yourself and it's like, what am I good at? What am I not good at? What am I
Yeah.
comfortable with? What am I not comfortable with?
Mm-mm.
And that's the thing. It's like, starting a business in my 40s and and just like you talked about, before with like, I don't have a business background. I came in it because I was passionate about it.
Yep.
But there are certain aspects where I think, and especially in a business when you can build your team, like social media. I am not good on social media. I'm a
Yeah.
very private person. I don't
Yeah.
want to post stuff. No one cares what I ate today. I don't
Right.
want to show them my food,
Right.
And so it's just, so I think it's just, as an adult, you get to kind of say, okay, this is what I'm good at. This is this. And
Yeah.
then I can bring in the people that, can help me with these other areas.
That's right.
But as a kid, like a college kid, you have no idea,
Mm-mm.
you know?
And you
So
think you have to
yeah,
be the
it's
best at everything. And,
right.
like that's one thing that's really a challenge is, they force these different things on you in school. Like you have to take all of these different standards, and those standards are good for
Right.
flushing out, like, giving you the basics.
Yeah.
But, in college, I loved English. I loved writing. And so when I took my SATs, I had placed out of all English classes in college, but I still took them
Mhm.
because I enjoyed it. Did
Right.
I take advanced math? Hell no. I was I was saying I took whatever I had to take, and that was
Yes.
it. You weren't going to see
Yep.
me in anything beyond statistics. And so,
Yep.
yeah, it's just like I took what I had to take because it wasn't my forte, and I had
Exactly.
no intention of going into a career where math was my main focus every day because I knew
Yep.
that would be miserable. So,
Yep.
but some people, if I really, really like, I just hired a fractional CFO. Why did I hire a fractional CFO? Because it's not my skill set. I would rather hire
Exactly.
that than
Yep.
have to learn it and muddle
Oh
my
yeah.
way through it. And so I stick with what I'm good at. I hire out the rest.
Yep. Absolutely. And yet again, you build your team. You build your team
Mm-hmm.
because those are their strengths, and you
Mm-hmm.
can applaud them for their strengths, and that's fantastic.
Yep.
And
Yep.
yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Play to your strengths. Don't force yourself into things that don't feel
Yeah.
right. Because I'm gonna do a bad job of it anyway. So might as well
Right.
just give it somebody else who enjoys it.
Oh
So
yeah.
as women, we often give our power away. So we give our power away just in taking criticism or in giving somebody credit for our work or something like that.
Yep.
We've given our power away many, many, many times as women. Can you tell me about a time that you gave your power away?
Oh yeah. Um, hmm. I'm trying to think of which one.
I know. It's never
Because
the did I, it's always, oh, which time
I
was
know, like,
that?
which example would be best here? I think it took me a long time. And yet again, like, I love being in my 40s
Hmm.
because in my 20s, I can't think of how many compliments I got where I immediately like, nope, nope, oh no, 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 it's no,
Yeah.
like it took me the longest time to actually call myself a writer. Here I have a
Really?
master's degree. Oh yeah, because I had put this pressure on myself that I'm like, well, I'm not published yet. So I'm not
Mm.
really a writer because I'm not published yet. And it's like, oh, well, you got published in this newspaper. Oh yeah, but that's not a magazine. I'm not published yet.
Huh.
I'm not. Right.
Interesting.
And it was just this kind of stigma I kept kind of on myself. So every time, yeah, like I was given a compliment as like, oh, that was a great story, or that was this. Oh no, but his was so much better. Oh, like, oh, he was
Uh-huh.
so great. And so like my first internship was at Sierra Magazine in San Francisco for the Sierra Club. And the guy I was working under, so I was the research intern, so I was kind of the fact check girl. And so I was cleaning up everybody else's stories
Yeah.
when they didn't do their research. Um, and so it was just one day where it's like the editor in chief, she gave me a compliment of like, oh, that was a really great thing you did. And immediately I said, oh, well, like my boss, he really helped me out with that. Like that was, he's so great. Like, isn't he so great? He's so phenomenal. And
Wow.
I mean, it it took me less than a second to change the subject of the conversation from me to him.
Uh-huh.
And it was just, and I remember she kind of gave me this look like, huh, yeah, I know he's good. I know that's why I hired him, but I'm talking about you. And
Yeah.
and it was just, you look back on it now, and it's just, yeah. And then that's one thing I really try to kind of work with my daughter on, is just when someone gives you a compliment, accept it. Like,
Yeah.
thank you. You can be humble and you can be gracious and you can do all those things, but you do not need to deflect or immediately put yourself down, or whatever. It's just like, even in restaurants, like with the waitress, sometimes I'm like, oh, I love those earrings, or oh, that's a beautiful color on you, or something
Yeah.
like that. And it's incredible how women were so ingrained to just like, oh, well, it's got a stain on it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
or,
Absolutely.
it's just, so yeah. So I've definitely given my power away in many ways, just the deflect. like
Yeah.
keep the subject on anything other than me because that makes me uncomfortable. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
So often, and I think that's why we also hold ourselves back. We talk about how men advance so much quicker in the workforce, but I think a lot of that falls on it falls in the hands of the women because we
right,
aren't promoting ourselves. We aren't,
right,
we aren't putting ourselves in a position to get that praise and accept it
yes,
and then leverage it for something. So we
exactly,
will downplay our accomplishments, whereas, men will generally overplay their accomplishments. And so
yeah,
that alone will play a big factor in it. So
for sure.
very interesting. So yeah, is there a time that you can say that you stepped into your power then?
When I started my company, I would
Yeah.
say that was kind of, that was the first, because, and I think sometimes, I'm sure it's, universal for everyone, but probably for women too. And sometimes you got to get mad.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's that sense of like, enough,
Yeah.
like, okay, enough. And
Hmm.
I think it was, like I say, like my author, Andy Domick, I had written the manuscript for my third book, and he was showing me the fairy tales like Ruined by Cabbage.
Yeah.
And he was trying to shop it around to, agents. And he was trying to do all the things that you are traditionally supposed to do
Hmm.
in this day and age with books, right? You're
Yeah.
supposed to find the agent, and then the agent is supposed to do the work, and they're supposed to get the publisher, and they're supposed, and all this stuff. And he was doing everything he was supposed to do, and it wasn't happening. It was like
Mm.
it was always the almost but not quite.
Yeah.
Almost but not there. And it was just so frustrating. And it was just, yeah. So it's sometimes you're just like, nope, okay, like we're gonna do this. Like, Andy, you're gonna have your book, where it's gonna be on 100% recycled paper. We're gonna get it out. We're gonna get you, on social media and TikTok, and we're gonna, you're gonna have fun, and you're gonna do your dad jokes because you're phenomenal at them. And we're gonna do this. Like, let's go. And I think, stuff like that. And like another example would be from my book, The Trees. The illustrator is, well, she was 9 years old at the time. She's now 11.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was, her name is Emma Whaley, and her story is incredible. And it was just kind of a scenario of I'd written this book, and I had worked with phenomenal like illustrators before, like Joe Gershman, just amazing. And I was trying to figure out kind of the right art for the story. And yeah, I'd kind of talked with and and not interviewed, but kind of discussed the book with multiple illustrators, and nothing felt right. And then I met Emma, and it was just her art. It was just like, that's it. And she has overcome a great deal of adversity in her very young life.
Oh.
And it was just another kind of one of those things where it's just like, maybe not anger, but that kind of, sometimes you just kind of know, right? You get that feeling where it's like, yep,
Yep.
this is it. Yep,
Yep.
like here we go. And it's just having that kind of assurance that it's just,
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm gonna make this happen. But like,
Mm.
yeah,
That's fantastic. I love that. So this has been a really fun conversation, Georgia. I've really enjoyed it.
yeah,
I've learned a lot. So thank you for that. I just have one
absolutely.
more question for you. And what do you wish more people knew?
Um, like we spoke about earlier, I wish more people knew that there are other options out there, than just kind of the standard, right?
Yeah.
I wish people, I wish people knew. Well, and like we spoke to, like there is power in the dollar. It's
Hmm.
just, we have so much power in our purchasing power and in what we can decide, like,
Absolutely.
it's just with so many things like like the oat milk and almond milk and soy milk is kind of as an example, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You go into most cafes now, and you can ask for alternative milks, and that's a thing. And
Hmm.
people had to ask for that. People had to fight for that. And
Yeah.
I think it's just, we can use our power in so many ways. And
Hmm.
yeah, I wish people could kind of, really lean into that more as far as
Absolutely.
like, yeah, where we spend our money, what companies we use, and what we ask for, what we demand, and what we
Hmm.
deserve, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Money talks.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Georgia. I have really, really enjoyed our entire conversation. And how can people find you?
We're on, of course, online, saluspublishing.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook. Andy Domick has his own TikTok, and he's phenomenal. We have our YouTube channel, where you can hear the authors read their own books.
Yeah.
One of my latest authors, Cy Swan, he's a frequent guest on the Essential Craftsman YouTube channel. They've
Very
got like
cool.
2 million followers or something like that.
Yeah,
So
very cool.
yeah, we're out there.
Awesome. And you can also find Georgia on prettypowerfulpodcast.com. So if you can't find her links, just go to prettypowerfulpodcast.com and we'll make sure all of her links are on there. And tell me the name of your books.
My personal books are The Death-Defying Daredevilish Deeds of the Outlaws Buster and Mooney. That's
Oh,
about my dogs. The Trees,